The Seattle Seahawks finished the 2023 regular season with a 9-8 record and missed the playoffs for the second time in 3 years. Despite a winning record, it was a very frustrating season for the Seahawks because it seemed like a year of missed opportunity. This team started out with a 5-2 record through their first 7 games, and even beat the Lions and Browns during this time period, both of which would go to the postseason, and Detroit, of course, would go on to the NFC Championship game. But after a 37-3 loss to the Ravens in Week 9, it was pretty downhill from there. They beat the Commanders in the ensuing week to improve to 6-3, but would drop 4 straight games to fall to 6-7, before winning 3 of their final 4 to finish at 9-8. I wanted to buy into the Seahawks throughout the 2023 season, but every time there was a test, it seemed like the Seahawks failed. Whether that test was in Week 9 against Baltimore, or in Week 12 against the 49ers, or even in their second game in 3 weeks against the 49ers in Week 14, it seemed like Seattle couldn't get out of their own way. And despite having a winning record, they had a negative point difference last year. And for as frustrating as the 2023 season was at times, the Seahawks are building a great football team that took a lot of steps in the right direction this offseason. Now, it may not pay off immediately in 2024, but I really like what this team has going for them. Now let's begin. Watching the Seattle Seahawks for the past 2 years has been a roller coaster, truly. There's times where there's incredibly high highs, like Geno Smith making one of the best throws you'll ever see in a 2022 game against the Saints, only to lose that exact game because Taysom Hill ran for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns on your defense. Or in 2023 when you start the year 6-3 and somehow miss the playoffs. If you followed the channel for any duration over the past few years, then you know my biggest gripe with the Seahawks has been their run defense, and for good reason. Seattle finished the 2022 season 30th in rushing yards allowed, 26th in yards per carry allowed, and 30th in rushing attempts allowed, and the reason we include rushing attempts allowed are really rushing attempts against, because you obviously can't control what an opposing offensive play caller calls, is because teams knew they could run on Seattle, and run. And I was a big believer heading into the 2023 season that Seattle could make noise as long as they weren't atrocious in run defense like they were in 2022. My thought process was if Seattle can even be league average in run defense in 2023, this can easily be a team that wins 12 games and wins a playoff game and would be a very tough out in January. But things don't always go according to plan, and Seattle finished the 2023 season 31st in rushing yards allowed instead of 30th, and they were 27th in yards per carry allowed, both of which were worse than 2022. And the title of today's video of the Seattle Seahawks are building a great football team starts with their head coach. I have the utmost respect for new Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald, and I think the Seahawks roster is one of the better rosters in the NFL, but it's going to take some time to get everything going and to get everybody on the same page. Mike Macdonald is one of the more respected coaches across all of football. Whether it's his former defensive players in Baltimore, whether it's coaches across the league, you name it, nobody has a bad thing to say about Macdonald. And a big reason for that is how Macdonald sends pressure. Ted Nguyen of The Athletic wrote a really great article about this, and to summarize a few points from the article, Macdonald will coach pressure patterns so all of the defensive players know each other's jobs and how to execute different pressures from different fronts. And how this translates is the defense can send a pressure from a base defense, but have guys from different layers of the defense try and get home. Sometimes this can be referred to as a simulated pressure, where defensive linemen may drop into coverage after initially engaging with opposing offensive linemen before dropping into a zone. Macdonald can change how the defense looks, whether it's base, whether it's lining 2 guys in the A-gap, which is referred to as a double A-gap mug, or load one entire side of the defensive line, and it doesn't really matter what is called because it all stems from Macdonald creating pressure patterns rather than saying, hey Boye Mafe, here's your job and here's what you are going to be doing from the end of July until the beginning of January, if that makes sense. This is the start of a new era of defensive football, and Macdonald is playing a huge part in this, and I firmly believe the Seahawks are going to be one of the better defenses in football over the next few years, due in large part to this. Now, what can sometimes be forgotten about when getting excited for a new coach or a new system your favorite team is going to run on offense is they have to have the talent to be able to maximize what they're doing. And that was a big reason why Baltimore's defense was not just the best in 2023, but one of the best over the last 5 to 10 years. They had a perfect combination of several Pro Bowl caliber players, along with a very sharp defensive mind calling the game. I mean, the 2023 Ravens played CJ Stroud and Patrick Mahomes 3 times cumulatively in 2023 and held them to 29 points in 3 games. Technically 36 if you include the 10 from the Texans playoff game, but the touchdown came on a punt return, which is not Mike McDonald's fault. The reason we have brought up the Ravens defense so much is because this is the vision for the Seahawks moving forward. And to go back to how frustrating it was watching the Seahawks over the last 2 years, well, I'll put it like this. There's a reason Texas' Byron Murphy was the first pick of the Mike McDonald era. Murphy was a very, very good defensive tackle prospect coming out of Texas, and for as good of a pass rushing DT as he is, he's not just a pass rushing defensive tackle. He had 29 tackles during his final season with the Longhorns and was stout in the run game, which is huge for Seattle. Now, what I want to emphasize and what needs to be remembered for the Seahawks moving forward is Murphy will be a 22-year-old rookie. There's also some concern regarding his arm length and wingspan as he transitions to the NFL level. I think he will be a very good player for a long time for Seattle, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a bit of a transition period in 2024. What also needs to be remembered is Byron was playing against teams in the Big 12 last year and not the NFL every single week. I think he will be a very good player in the long run, and that him and Devin Witherspoon will be the faces of Mike McDonald's defense, but it's not going to be an overnight fix. Another reason why I love the Murphy pick was where the NFC West is and where it's headed. I loved Arizona's draft, and especially with how their roster is constructed and with what they are trying to do moving forward. They are going to pound the rock. Yes, of course, they have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride along with Kyler Murray at quarterback, but the Cardinals ran for over 200 yards as a team in 3 of their final 4 games in 2023, and by selecting Trey Benson and Tip Ryman with 2 top 100 picks, especially a blocking tight end in Tip Ryman, who will effectively be a 6th offensive lineman when he's on the field, running the football is a huge, huge emphasis for Arizona moving forward. We bring the Cardinals up not just because they're in the NFC West, but they will be thorns in a lot of teams' sides this year. The Rams also have a very underrated running back in Kyren Williams and even drafted Blake Corum in the 3rd round this year. Matt Stafford is also getting up there in age, and I think the Rams will be one of the better running teams this year. They finished 12th in yards per carry last year and 11th in rushing yards, and with a 2-headed monster in Kyren and Corum, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they finish in the top 10 or even top 8 this year. We obviously know the 49ers can run the football, and when you have 6 of your 17 games against teams that can and want to run the football, you have to be tough up front, period. You can't hem-haul around and hope that they're going to call 60 passing plays against you and conveniently forget this has been one of the worst run defenses over the last 2 years. I mean, this is the NFL we're talking about, and needless to say, Seattle needed to get tougher in the trenches, and they did by bringing in Byron Murphy with their 1st-round pick. I truly think the NFC West is going to be one of the better divisions in football in 2024, and it's a division not really anybody is talking about. The title of today's video is The Seattle Seahawks Are Building a Great Football Team. And they are, but it's just going to take some time for everything to gel and for everything to come together. The San Francisco 49ers are the model and the gold standard of who to build a team after in the NFC. They've went to the Super Bowl twice in the past 5 years. They've been to the NFC Championship game in 4 of the past 5 years as well. The 49ers have also beat the Seahawks 5 times over the past 2 years. The reason it's 5 instead of 4 is because they played them in the 2022 wildcard round, and in these 5 games, the 49ers have beat the Seahawks by 76 points, or cumulative 76 points, for an average margin of defeat for the Seahawks of over 15 points per game. Now, if you want to be technical and say Drew Lock started one of those games, which he did in Week 14 of this past season, Seattle's defense allowed over 500 yards of offense in that game, so I don't think Drew Lock starting had that big of an impact on that game regardless. For as much as I love what the Seahawks did this offseason, and as much as I like their head coach, and as much as I like what they're going to do moving forward, I'd be lying if I didn't have one big concern, and that's what exactly are they going to do at the quarterback position post-2024. Geno's been a good player for them over the past 2 years, especially during the 2022 season, but is Sam Howell going to be the long-term guy? I mean, even the most loyal Seahawks fans probably don't think that, and I feel like there's this underlying feeling that if Geno has a bad 3 or 4 game stretch, or if he has, a 6 or 7 game span where he has 6 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, or whatever the case may be, if he starts to struggle under new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, I think there's going to be this thought of, well, Geno's already kind of old, we don't have a lot of money tied to him, so we can just move on, and we can try and play Sam Howell from here. And I think there is potential for some quarterback controversy for the Seahawks in 2024. Now, again, I love what they're doing from an overall roster standpoint, and I love all of the moves they made this past year, but the quarterback position is one that I have some concerns with the Seahawks moving forward. That, to me, is a true question mark for Seattle beyond the 2024 season. But pertaining to the 2024 season and what we can expect out of the Seahawks offensively is, well, a lot. They have playmakers everywhere on this offense, whether it's a two-headed monster at running back in Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, or any of the 3 receivers in DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, or, of course, 2023 first-round pick Jackson Smith-Njigba. One of the Seahawks picks I liked a lot from their 2024 class was third-round guard Christian Haynes. I was very high on UCLA running back Zach Charbonnet in the 2023 draft process, and I thought he had a pretty disappointing rookie season, all things considered. Now, to be clear, I had him at RB3, of course, behind Bijan and Gibbs, but I thought Charbonnet could be an 800 or 900 yard back, and I thought Kenneth and Zach could have similar success to what Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery had in Detroit. But neither back ran for 1,000 yards, and they combined for just 10 total touchdowns, which I thought was pretty disappointing relative to how good each back is. But I do think Seattle walked out of the 2024 draft with 2 long-term starters in Byron Murphy, of course, and eventually Christian Haynes. And I like these 2 players specifically for Seattle because of what that means for their future. These are guys that will set the tone on their sides of the ball. While Mike McDonald had the best defense in the NFL last year in Baltimore, he absolutely saw firsthand what it was like having a great rushing attack on the other side, and how important complementary football is for a team's success. Now, the schedule has been released for all 32 teams, and we still will do team previews in a little over 2 months leading up to the start of the 2024 season, so I will discuss the schedule more in depth during the official 2024 Seahawks team preview, but what I will say is this. Their first 3 games in 2024 are home against the Broncos, at the Patriots, and home against the Dolphins. And I think there's a very real possibility the Seahawks start the year 3-0. I also think offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb will get second-year player Jackson Smith-Njigba involved a lot more in year 2 than he was in year 1. Now, what I want to emphasize and what I want to hammer home with the 2024 Seahawks specifically is I don't think they're going to the Super Bowl this year. And to be honest, I would be surprised if they go to the NFC Championship game for that matter either. But from a long-term perspective, I absolutely believe in what they're doing, and while there will certainly be tough times and adversity to battle through this year, I think they have the right man leading them, and I think there's going to be a big change in what we see out of the Seattle Seahawks in the near future. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 40% of people watching are subscribed, as well as check out the Football Analysis podcast. If you like this content, you will love the podcast, and the link is in the bio. Until next time, be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.